Hello, hello. It is beautiful. The sky is blue. The lyric continues. I'm very pleased to be here to continue reading Anyone Got a Match by Max Schulman. And we are now moving into chapter 10. Ira Shapian, wearing a houndstooth jacket, drove his Jaguar Mark 7 into the crushed rock driveway of his half-timbered house in Bel Air. He switched off the ignition and sat wearily for a moment, his hand pressed against his forehead. He had had an even more galling day than usual at Star Spangled. A John Birching sponsor had deleted all mention of the United Nations from a documentary celebrating the founding of the United Nations. An artsy-fartsy director had shot a Western with such low-key lighting that it looked as though the wranglers were herding cattle inside a shoe, and the star of The Day Lincoln Was Shot had adamantly refused to grow a beard. Only one small pleasure had accrued to Ira in the preceding 12 hours. He had, for the 8th consecutive day, declined to accept any phone calls from Clendenin. But the luster of this minor satisfaction was rapidly dimming. True, he was curdling Clendenin's liver by not taking his calls, but also true, and much more to the point, Ira knew that when the time came to sign the new contract, he would sign. There was no escape now. The collar and leash were too firmly fastened. A snapping dog Ira might be, but indubitably a dog. "Arf," said Ira mournfully, and picked up a small, handsomely wrapped package on the seat beside him, and got out of the car and went into the house. "Hi," said Polly. "You look grizzly." "Thank you," said Ira. "Where's Ezra and Leo?" "Vic Tanny's." "Where else?" said Ira, and sighed. "Want me to fix a martini?" "Desperately," he replied. "But first, I want a kiss." "You do?" Her eyes grew round with surprise. "I do," he affirmed, "but nothing strenuous, mind you." "This about right?" she asked, and gave him a kiss that fell midway between passion and inadvertence. "Splendid," he said. He handed her the little package he had carried in from the car. "In honor of our 21st wedding anniversary," he explained. "Very expensive." She unwrapped the package. Inside lay a pair of small, flawless diamond ear clips. "Thank you," she said courteously. "Enough," said Ira, raising his hand. "You know I can't stand these unseemly displays of emotion." Polly looked him square in the eyes. "No, I mean it, thank you. It was thoughtful of you to remember. Trouble is, it's not what I wanted. So take him back to the jeweler and exchange him. The jeweler hasn't got what I want." "I know I'll regret this question, but what do you want?" "Well, I thought. I'm a dreamer, I guess. Anyhow, I thought, no, hoped is the word. I hoped that tonight, I don't mean to get maudlin, Ira, but after all, we are married 21 years. I hoped that tonight, as kind of a special treat, we might talk." "Possibly the reason we are married 21 years, suggested Ira, is that we don't." "Possibly," she said without expression. "I'll fix your drink." He followed her to the sideboard, guilt nipping softly at his vitals. He turned her around as she started working with vodka and vermouth. "Listen," he said earnestly, "what happens when we talk? You ask me not to sign the new contract. I explain why I have to. You reject my explanation. Then it's scream time. Is that bad?" "Polly," he pleaded, "I'm too old. All day long I scream at the studio. Can't I have a snug harbor when I come home?" "Yes, ancient mariner," she said. "Here's your booze." "You know I can't quit." "Like hell I do," she answered. She handed Ira his drink and poured one for herself. Mockingly, she touched glasses with him. "To you, my dear, to 21 years, to love, to life, and to inertia." "Sweet," said Ira, smiling tightly, his knuckles white against the stem of his glass. "Very sweet, and so beautifully timed. I give you diamond earrings, you give me a hatchet in the skull. Why, Polly?" "Because I love you, dumbbell," she cried, abandoning civility. "Because after all these years, I love you more foolishly and more completely than ever. And I know that no matter what those people have done to you, you're still Ira Shapian. Under that heap of trauma, there's still a set of large, perfectly usable balls." Ira unhinged his mouth to shout, then with an effort shut it. I will give you a soft answer to turn away wrath, he said. I think you're an absolutely marvelous woman, and I regret I'm not the man you hoped for. But you are! But I'm not. And finish your drink. We have a 9 o'clock reservation at Chasson's. Yes, dear, she said, resigned. Then a sudden thought struck her. Wait a minute. Not Chasson's. Clendenin is in town. He paled. How do you know? His secretary called from the airport a little while ago. Clendenin wants to join us for dinner. I said Chasson's, 9 o'clock. Good thinking, he said appreciatively. Now, let's see. Where can we go where he won't find us? How about hiring a blimp? Polly, this is serious. About as serious as a 5-year-old kid playing hide and seek. You know Clendenin is going to corner you sooner or later. True. So what do you think you're accomplishing? I'll tell you exactly. I'm making Clendenin sweat. But more importantly, I'm making Mr. Davies sweat a little bit too. And if Mr. Davies gets sweaty enough, Clendenin is out. Clendenin fired? Said Polly incredulously. Boy, are you playing a long shot. In fact, an astronomically long shot. But okay, let's say you make it happen. Then what? Who do you think Mr. Davies will get to replace Clendenin? Albert Schweitzer? Polly, I've been in the business a few years. I know Mr. Davies will go looking for a carbon copy of Clendenin, but here's the point. What if, by accident, he hires a nice guy? Then the network will go bankrupt, and you'll be out of work. Why am I complaining? Come on, where'll we have dinner? Hey, I got an idea. Feel like eating chink? With you, pussycat? Anything. I drove past a new place on the way home. Not exactly chink. Polynesian, I guess, or maybe early Dorothy L'Amour. Anyhow, the sign said grand opening tonight. Let's try it. They finished their martinis and got into the Jaguar Mark 7 and drove to Beverly Hills and stopped in front of a new restaurant built of bamboo and roofed with thatch and adorned with pagan idols and girt with coconut palms and illustrated with tall torches and named, inevitably, the Moo Moo. The exterior decor was repeated indoors. More bamboo, thatch, idols, palms, and torches, plus war masks, spears, fan-backed chairs of rattan, and dusky waiters, festooned with leis and sporting chicken bones in their hair. The head waiter approached, grinning hugely. Good evening, Mr. Shapian, Mrs. Shapian. Your table is ready. But I haven't got a reservation, said Ira. The waiter chuckled so hard that his chicken bones rattled. Sahib is humorous tonight, he simpered, wagging a forefinger. This way, please. The Shapian shrugged and followed the waiter to a table overlooking a genuine waterfall. Seated there, smiling whitely in his black suit, was Harry Clendenin. He leaped to his feet. Polly, honey, he cried, kissing her cheek. Ira, baby, he cried, wringing his hand. Sit, sit, sit. Well, well, if it ain't old Mephisto, said Polly, and sat. Ira, shaking his head, sank into a rattan chair. Harry, how do you do it? He asked with grudging respect. American know-how, said Clendenin. He turned to the waiter. Boy, bring us 3 Reverend Davidsons, and boy, chop, chop. Giggling, the waiter rushed away. Kids, said Clendenin to the Shapians, let me do the ordering. I really dig this Polynesian jazz. Swell, said Ira. I head for the islands whenever I can, said Clendenin. Wild, that sweet-scented air, that blue, blue sea, that white surf breaking on the white sands. I'm getting all choked up, said Polly. Me too, said Ira, but how about we say aloha and turn to business? By all means, said Clendenin. Ira, baby, I flew out here to tell you, friendly-like, that I know your game and you're a loser. You are not going to goose Mr. Davies into firing me. He can't. Where would he find a duplicate? The Cosa Nostra, suggested Polly, helpfully. Amusing, said Clendenin, favoring her with a smile. Also amusing when you called me Mephisto, and that's just my point. Ira Chickie, be smart, settle for the devil you know. I suppose I should, agreed Ira. Still, what if your replacement turns out to be not altogether a bastard? Slim chance. Yes, but hope springs eternal. Ira, I've got a little shock for you. I'm going to level with you tonight. You won't believe me, of course, but I'm going to speak the truth. Your game is not completely a bust. You do have Mr. Davies just a tiny bit worried. If you stall long enough on the new contract, there is a possibility that Mr. Davies will lower the boom on me. Just a fly speck of a probability, but nevertheless, a possibility. I'd be a whole lot happier if I had your signature right now. My happiness, of course, is not exactly what you're after, but, Ira sweetie, I've figured out a way to make you happier too. Ah, said Polly, here comes the zinger. No, not quite yet, said Ira. He's still got a few bars of introduction. You're right, Ira baby, said Clendenin. Just a bit more. Ah, but here's our drinks. 3 Reverend Davidsons, grinned the waiter, and placed before them 3 hollowed-out pineapples filled with crushed ice, grenadine syrup, and a ropey admixture of rum. Bring us a plate of rumaki, boy, said Clendenin to the waiter. Chop, chop, replied the waiter merrily, and jogged away. I'm queer for this Polynesian chow, confessed Clendenin. Drink up, troops. Later, said Ira. I want to be alert while you tell the lie. No lies, declared Clendenin. Plain truth. I know it's bugging you, Ira. You think you've got a big hate on for me. Well, you're wrong. Me, guys like me, were facts of television, and you long ago accepted it. No, buddy boy, it's not me you're teed off at. It's somebody else. Now comes the zinger, said Ira to Polly. I can hardly wait, she said, leaning forward. Yes, now comes the zinger, said Clendenin. He paused a moment for dramatic effect. Hear me good, Ira lover. Listen to the zinger. You are not mad at me at all. Who you are mad at is a guy named Ira Shapian. Polly watched nervously as a thoughtful frown creased Ira's forehead. Ira, she said, plucking his sleeve. Ira, he's getting to you. Ira gave Polly a reassuring pat, which failed signally to reassure her. Go on, Clendenin, he said. You hate yourself, Clendenin continued. You feel filthy, violated, used. But most of all, you feel you've sold out a big talent for a fistful of loot. And it was a big talent, Ira. I remember the shows you used to make. Bold, gutsy, important shows. Ira, you're buying it, said Polly sadly. For the moment, yes, Ira agreed, because for the moment, Clendenin isn't lying. He will, said Polly. He won't, said Clendenin. He whipped a document out of his breast pocket. Here it is, all legal and binding, a brand new contract with a brand new wrinkle. The raise, of course, the stock options, of course, but here's the weenie. You sign this paper tonight, and tomorrow you get a 6 months leave of absence to produce a show for Star Spangled. And here's the list you can choose from. You can do Oedipus Rex with 2 full hours with Olivier and Judith Anderson. Or you can sail with the first atomic sub to go under the Antarctic ice cap. Or you can do the Central Intelligence Agency, everything below top secret. Or you can do the oral contraceptive test in Puerto Rico with full cooperation from Munoz Marin. Or you can do the NASA Space Center at Houston. Or you can do the heroin traffic, Hong Kong to Sicily to New York with actual film. All these things are locked in, pussycat. Just pick the one you want, and we'll provide full financing and all the crew, cast, and equipment you need. This is the big time, Ira baby. Not like those nickel and dime epics you made back in the old days. Well, what do you say? There was silence now, and a total lack of motion. Ira sat wrapped in thought. Polly, eyes closed, sent out a steady beam of prayer. Clendenin was as still as an expert angler watching a trout sniff a fly. Ramaki, announced the waiter proudly, and laid a plate on the table. Clendenin dismissed him with a quick, angry gesture. Ira spoke. No, he said. No what, Ira baby? Asked Clendenin with a cautious smile. No deal, said Ira, and Polly opened her eyes and cast them gratefully heavenward. Clendenin kept smiling. What is it, Ira? Don't you like these projects? I love these projects, answered Ira. Who would not? But what I love even better is the possibility that I can get you fired. A small possibility, a dim possibility, an infinitesimal possibility. True, but my only possibility. Without changing expression, Clendenin picked up a piece of ramaki. His smiling teeth lopped it in half like a guillotine. Rage boiled inside him, rage against Ira that demanded release. But he was far too shrewd to direct the wrath toward its proper target. Waiter! He roared. The waiter, wide grin and lay, was instantly at his side. Sahib, he said pleasantly. You call this ramaki? Snarled Clendenin. Yes, sir, said the waiter, his grin fixed. Very good. Specialty of the house. Look, boy, save that palaver for the tourists. Now take this slop back to the kitchen and bring me some ramaki. Suddenly a newcomer was at the table, a large, handsome man, the color of ancient copper. He was dressed not in lay and chicken bones, but in a well-cut dinner jacket. "Something wrong?" he asked in a deep, smooth voice. Polly and Ira bounded to their feet. "Linus!" they shouted. "Linus Calloway!" They hurled themselves upon him, clasping his hands, slapping his back, hugging him with pure joy. And Linus replied in kind. "Polly! Ira! Ira! Polly!" he cried delightedly and enveloped them in his great brawny arms. Clendenin gaped. "What the hell's going on here?" Linus' face grew instantly sober. "Excuse me," he said, releasing Pyra and Ira. "Something you wanted, sir," he said to Clendenin. "You the manager?" asked Clendenin sharply. "Manager and owner," replied Linus. "Good. Now about this so-called Ramaki." "Oh, ignore him," said Ira, grabbing Linus again. "He's just my boss." "What is all this?" asked Polly, indicating the hokey Polynesian motif. "What in the world are you up to?" "It's a long, long story," answered Linus. "So sit down and tell it," said Ira, and pushed Linus into a fan-backed chair. "Look," said Clendenin. "Butt out," said Ira. "Linus, why didn't you tell us you were in Los Angeles?" said Polly. "Where have you been for the last 20 years?" said Ira. "How did you get into the restaurant business?" said Polly. "And why haven't we heard from you?" said Ira. "If you will forgive this intrusion," said Clendenin. "Eat your Ramaki," said Polly. "It is not Ramaki," said Clendenin crossly. "Come on, Linus, start at the beginning," said Ira. Linus laughed his deep, booming laugh. "Okay, kids, but I'll have to give it to you fast. I mean, like in 5 minutes. This is opening night, remember, and the joint's full of customers." "So get started already," said Polly. "Right. 5 minutes version, The Adventures of Linus Calloway. Now, let's see. When's the last time we were all together?" "New York, 1942, replied Ira, "just before you went into the Navy." "As a mess boy," said Polly indignantly. "Scandalous. Making a mess boy out of a man like you just because you happen to have dark skin. Scandalous." "Damn right," agreed Ira. "Well, thank God we've gotten a little more civilized since then." "Have we?" asked Linus mildly. "Haven't we?" asked Polly, searching his eyes. "Oh, sure, I know we've only just scratched the surface to race relations, but we have made a little progress." "Haven't we?" she repeated uncertainly. "Look, I've given up on the Ramaki," said Clendenin. "All I'd like to say is this. Polly and Ira, if you want to learn about Mr. Calloway in 5 minutes, wouldn't it be wise to postpone the symposium on the color problem till another time?" "But Linus, life is the color problem," said Ira. "Anyhow, it was. Is it still?" "It is," said Linus. "Good," said Polly. "And we're with you 100%, said Ira. "But what about this restaurant?" said Polly. "May I be moderator?" said Clendenin. "So far, we have established that Mr. Calloway joined the Navy as a mess boy in 1942. Will you proceed, sir?" "Thank you," said Linus. "Well, I was a damn good mess boy. I suppose folks got natural rhythm, you know, even in the kitchen. I got so good that by 1944, I was chef to an admiral at Pearl Harbor. Pretty soft gig. All I had to do was keep coming up with new Hawaiian recipes. So I made friends with the colorful natives, and by the end of the war, I could whip up one hell of a luau. With the possible exception of Ramaki," said Clendenin. "All right, Mr. Calloway, the war is over now, and you have mastered the haute cuisine of Micronesia. Then what?" "I have also mastered a game called craps. I land in San Francisco with $10,000 in my skivvy shirt. I open a little place just off Market Street, the Moo Moo, I call it. I bring in a few of my kinfolk, and they bring in a few of their kinfolk, and I teach them a bit of pidgin and how to braid chicken bones in their hair. The place is a smash. I expand. I open another Moo Moo in Portland, then another in Seattle, and now tonight still another in Beverly Hills, and we're up to date." "Why have you never called or written?" asked Ira. "For a good reason," replied Linus, looking directly at Ira. "Because there's something I need from you." "And you won't," looking directly at Ira. "Because there's something I need from you. And you won't give it to me, and we'll both be horribly embarrassed." "Ridiculous," said Ira stoutly. "There's nothing in the world I wouldn't do for you. Now, come on, Linus. Tell me what you need." "A program director," said Linus. Ira looked puzzled. "For your restaurants?" "For my television station," replied Linus. A tremor of nervousness shook Clendenin. "You have a television station, Mr. Calloway?" "I'm about to open one." "Where?" Linus laughed. "Here comes the funny part, Mr. Clendenin. You may possibly have noticed that I am a Negro. Well, my television station is located in Birmingham." "Oi," said Clendenin. "Precisely," said Linus. Distress clouded Ira's face. Linus, do you mind if I ask some questions? Shoot. Where did you get the money to buy this station? From my restaurants. And where will you get the money to operate it? Same place. You have no grants from foundation or the government or like that? No. Do you expect to sell any advertising? Me, Black Linus, sell advertising in Birmingham? Surely you jest. Are you aware that you won't get any network affiliation? I'm aware. Do you know what it costs to operate a TV station? I do. Will your income from the restaurants cover it? Just barely. So what have you got left to buy programs with? Nothing, or close to it. I see, said Ira, and returned to gloom. Now me, said Polly. Just one question, Linus, but a big one. Why? Same old reason. I still believe we can do something about race relations, only I believe it in a different way now. When you kids knew me 20 years ago, I believed it simply because I had to. But today there's a whole new face on it. There's an added ingredient, a thing called hope. You are encouraged then? Asked Polly eagerly. I mean, about the progress we've made in desegregation? Not a bit. Oh, sure, there's a few places we can get into today where we couldn't get into before. But there's one place we still can't enter, and we must, or else the rest is meaningless. I'm talking about the Caucasian heart. But Linus, what can we do about that? Can we pass laws? Can we legislate love? No, but we can educate love, or at least the appearance of love. Every politician and clergyman on earth working day and night can't persuade one white man to love one Negro unless the white man wants to. But the white man can be taught that hatred, overt active hatred, fire hoses and police dogs, that kind of thing is plain bad business. The whites need us for our big untapped reservoir of brain power and purchasing power. We need them because they've got the tools to open the floodgates. I sure wouldn't call it love, but it'll have to do until the real thing comes along. And you think it will come along? I mean, the real thing. Linus shrugged. Someday, maybe. At least there's hope. It's not a very big hope, I'll admit. In fact, it's pretty damn dim. But for the first time, it's hope that can honestly be called hope. Because today we have a new way to educate people, not to love, that's too much to ask for, but to show them where their self-interest lies. Today we have in our hands the most powerful, most persuasive, most graphic, most convincing teaching device since the beginning of time. I'm talking about television. Ah, now I understand, said Polly. You're starting an educational TV station. Good God, no, exclaimed Linus. And I'll thank you never to use those words again. You say educational TV and people immediately think of four guys with glasses discussing Babylonian artifacts. No, Polly, I intend to give them shows as funny as Beverly Hillbillies and as scary as Twilight Zone, but all the time slyly, so cute they never even notice it, I'm going to slip them a little learning. Would you mind a question from me? Asked Clendenin. You're my guest. Well, Mr. Calloway, I agree that your approach is basically sound, but how do you expect to buy all these shows with no money? Well, if I could find the right program director, said Linus, carefully, not looking at Ira, if I was lucky enough to get a man who knew how to make good, honest, entertaining shows that didn't cost a fortune, I'd be home free. And what would you be willing to pay such a person? Asked Clendenin. Linus threw back his head and laughed. Hell, man, money's no object. I could go as high as $100 a week. Ira slid deeper into his chair, shame weighing on him like a millstone. Do it, Ira, cried Polly silently in her heart. Do it, for your immortal soul and mine. Please, please do it. And Clendenin's face was a mask concealing triumph. Well, I certainly wish you all the luck in the world, said Clendenin, offering his hands to Linus. Thank you, said Linus, rising. I'll take this Ramaki back to the kitchen. No, 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 insisted Clendenin. I'm sorry I made such a fuss. I was all wrong. It's fine, Ramaki. That's what confused me. It's so much better than any Ramaki I ever tasted. Yeah, said Linus. Well, good night, Polly. Good night, Ira. Good night. Good night. Linus left. Nice fellow, said Clendenin. Ah, shut up, snarled Ira, then turning on Polly. And you too. I didn't say anything, said Polly. You didn't have to. I know what you're thinking. Well, forget it. You don't buy diamond earrings for $100 a week. Who asked for diamond earrings? Who asked for 2 lame-brained sons, countered Ira hotly. Who asked for 2 stinking houses? Who asked for 2 lousy swimming pools? Polly stood. I'm going home. Excuse me, Harry. Ira jumped to his feet. He grasped Polly's hand. I'm sorry, Polly, he said, overcome with contrition. I was way out of line. Please forgive me. She hesitated briefly, then nodded and resumed her seat. You too, Harry, said Ira to Clendenin. Please accept my apologies. I didn't mean to make a scene. Don't give it a thought, Ira baby, smiled Clendenin, squeezing Ira's shoulder. It's just like I said before, you've got a big hate on for yourself. What you need is a purification, a big project, a real challenge, something to give you back your self-respect. And it just happens, I've got it for you. Here, he shoved the contract toward Ira. Look over this list. Oedipus Rex, the atomic sub, Puerto Rico, NASA, CIA, the heroin traffic. Just tell me what you want. What I want is to see you on the street with a tin cup, said Ira. A ball of unease began to grow in Clendenin's belly, but he clung to his composure. All right, pussycat, forget the list. Is there anything you would particularly like to do? Yes, answered Ira. I would particularly like to see you on the street with a tin cup. Clendenin's mind, fighting panic, began to function furiously. Somehow, somewhere, there had to be a project that would tempt Ira. But what? He rummaged frantically. Nothing came to light. Then finally a thought struck him, a thin, dismal thought, but a thought. Listen, he said apologetically. Here's another idea, not exactly sensational, but let's see how you react. I hate it, said Ira. Clendenin pressed on. We're scheduling a 60-minute special on the dangers in food additives. It's coming out of this college Jefferson Tatum owns, Acanthus, it's called, which I'm told has been turned into a first-class school. Ira had a sudden, curious sensation, as of a fresh wind dispelling a filthy young fog. Acanthus, he thought, his heart leaping. Acanthus. Owens Mill. Boo. Yes, Boo. Purification. To hold Boo again. Golden. Salving, cleansing, Boo. Give me your pen, Clendenin, he said, and as Polly and Clendenin looked on, each mystified, Ira signed the contract.